Good evening and welcome to Political Cipher. I'm your host, Quandra Gaines, also known as Q. Hi, you guys are, and I want we're going to be talking about the lack of effectiveness that state of Maryland, and the counties have towards Black participation as Black businesses and MBE owners. So, welcome, Miss Ellis. I see that you're at the fundraiser for Westmore.
Yes.
And then we have Lisa Williams, Lisa Ellis. We have two Lisas today. Joe Gaskins, Mr. Branch. Hopefully, he will be signing on, and we'll have a special guest. Perhaps she'll be joining us later on. I'm losing my voice as well, but here we go. All right. So tell us what's going on at Westmore's fundraiser.
Oh my goodness, it's quite exciting here. Not only did he just give the vision for the state, but he gave the vision for what's going to happen in the country, and he's just straight going to take 3 businesses from every state that he attended and bring it back here to Maryland. So I'm looking forward to economic change. He talked about closing the educational gap, closing the wealth gap, increasing MBE participation, investing in small businesses, investing in technology and innovation and energy. So each time that I hear him, I get excited all over again, because not only will this be the most incredible decade that we've seen in the state of Maryland, but we're talking about removing our Black men from being the #1 incarcerated in the country to putting them in trades and placing them in good paying jobs and being innovative enough to look at solutions versus imprisonment. So there's a lot that's going on here, some incredible individuals to network with. And we know that the main goal right now is to drive home and motivate individuals to get out to vote.
Okay. Well, you guys are both at the campaign, so I can hear an echo. Welcome, Mr. Gaskins. How are you today?
I'm doing just fine. How are you making out?
I am doing well. Lisa was just telling us the excitement and all the wonderful things that the next governor of Maryland will be, is talking about economic development and all these different things. And he didn't just start with Maryland. He's talking about the whole entire country.
Yes, that's what we're hoping. So we're putting every bit of energy to make sure he is the next governor.
Of course. That's the whole point, accountability. So will Mr. Branch be joining us?
Yes, Mr. Branch will be on in a few minutes.
All right.
And I think Linda Thomas from the NAACP.
Okay, she's signing in soon. All right. So
we'll be on in a few minutes. Tell us
about the climate. Is it excitement? Is it a lot of excitement, or a lot of people buying into what the governor candidate is talking? Hi, Miss Williams. How are you?
I'm well. How are you all?
So this is Mr. Gaskins, Joseph Gaskins. This is Miss Williams.
We've met.
Lisa. See, there's 2 Lisas. Oh my goodness.
Hi, Lisa. I know Lisa too.
So Lisa Ellis, meet Lisa Williams.
Pleasure.
Nice to see you.
And we will be having Mr. Branch. Oh my goodness. So it's going to be
a full house.
All right. So we're going to start talking about, the first question is, who is an MBE?
Yeah, I mean, I can start with that question, who is the MBE? Because quite often, individuals in the industry have not understood. They know it's a program there, but they have not understood why or how a program was created. The MBE program was created in 1969. And in 1969, it was created by a unexpected person, Richard Nixon. He was the first individual who decided that there, as a president, there needed to be something to correct prior discriminatory practices against minority business companies.
Mm-hmm. And he's frozen.
There was a lot less people than what we're dealing with now in the industry.
Mm-hmm.
It was a program that was set up for African Americans, Native Americans, Aleuts, Eskimos, individuals who had a historical background of being discriminated against in the country. Over the period of time, the program has changed dramatically to now have encompass almost everybody else besides the African American and or Native American. And that's our concern, and that's why we're on to this afternoon to make sure that we address those particular issues which are hampering what I would say equal access, at least access for individuals that the program was originally intended to provide services to.
All right. And Miss Williams?
It's my understanding that it's a minority business enterprise to provide opportunities to minority businesses to get contracts with the government.
Mm-hmm. All right. And Miss Ellis?
Okay, I was trying to unmute myself. There's not much more to add to what Joe has already said. And what has been said here, the whole intent of the program was to increase participation. And, because we're in an election year, that's critical to closing that wealth gap and voting for individuals that can help us to do just that. The minority business program should have within the regulations a sunset date. Individuals that as they grow should then graduate from the program and no longer be included. An example of that would be white women. We know that shows that has happened there. So as we drill down in this conversation, I'm sure that we can address, the barriers of the program actually moving forward and existing, the disparity studies that support the need, as well as how do we elect individuals or those individuals that can carry the agenda that will help to move our businesses from small to mid-size and to help us to scale at a pace that's equivalent to our white counterparts.
I want to be more specific on the original program in place in 1969. When the program was put in 1969, it definitively outlined African Americans, Hispanic Americans, Native Americans, Alaskan Native corporations, Indian tribes, Native Hawaiians, Pacific Americans, and or subcontinental Asian Americans. And the program at that time was a Minority Business Developers Agency, MBDA, and it was established at the Office of Minority Business Enterprise in March 15, 1969 by the federal government. And from that particular program spun off the state programs. And in the state of Maryland's program did not go into effect too many years after. And the state of Maryland's program was put in place in 1978 by the Maryland General Assembly, enacting legislation creating the Minority Business Enterprise Program, which was the MBE. And essentially, those other state programs and county programs spun off of the federal legislation. And all those individuals have now had begun to not only put in place their own program, but also to put in place regulations that were a little bit different from the federal requirements. And that's the danger of pushing the program off, because in subsequent years after that, the programs were challenged, and then they were challenged because the state programs and local programs such as WSSC and programs with other states like Richmond versus Croson, uh, took liberty to change the language in their programs to please themselves versus operating as the standard program that was set up by Nixon. The program was an executive order. It didn't go through the General Assembly. At that time, you had very few uh, black individuals who were senators at the time. I think maybe we had Edward Brooke, who was a Republican senator during that time, and very few, Parent Mitchell out of Baltimore, and very few individuals who were empowered and had enough votes to push it through Congress. So the president essentially had to be the person who pushed it through office. But after that, it picked up steam. States began to pick it up one by one. They were challenged by prime contractors, and one of the main culprits in the industry was the AGC, which is Associated General Contractors, who didn't want to be in compliance to the program at all. They wanted to make sure that their program could continue, that their construction operations could continue without involving any African American contractors or any minority business people at all. They just wanted to run business, do business as usual. And unfortunately, if we look back at what took place and bring it up to date, we're not too much further from where we were then during the time of the implementation of the program when Nixon first approved the program. They are still operating in the same capacity, worse capacity, and our elected leadership has got to realize that something has to be done, because the numbers that we're going to be talking about later in the Prince George County, should be one of the strongest counties, who should be pushing forward an aggressive program, has a lukewarm program at best. In Baltimore City, we have the same situation. So I think the viewers should be aware that our intentions are to define those counties who have an obligation to correct prior discriminatory practices against Native Americans, who were absolutely, with no doubt, discriminated against, put on reservations, and African Americans who were brought over and put in involuntary servitude as slaves for over 400 years. Other individuals who've been added, yes, they are there, but they're all riding on the back of those two major groups: Native Americans, Indians, as individuals refer themselves to, or Native Americans, or African Americans, or as Black Americans, as we refer ourselves, are the entities who have been discriminated against. And we are the individuals who have to stand up and fight for these programs, otherwise we lose them.
Well, thank you, Joe, for that history. And then we're going to go back and we're going to ask the question. And Joe already gave us that, but we're going to give the two Lisas, the opportunity to put their viewpoint. When was the MBE established on the federal level? And are we talking about Maryland, or are we talking about throughout the United States?
We'll be talking about the federal level, and the federal level would be in 1969.
Okay.
That it was first in 69 and 1978 with the Maryland program. So actually it operated on the federal program level until it saw a need for the states to start to step in and start to implement those programs. And those programs came about 10 years later.
Okay. Ms. Williams?
And I would like to add that those local programs were necessary in addition to the state, because local jurisdictions and municipalities began to discriminate in the issuance of procurement with our white counterparts. So the discriminatory practices, although it was implemented at the state, had to drill down to the local levels and be enforced. So as we would discuss or see later, is that's still a barrier. Enforcement at the agency level, enforcement from our elected officials to make sure that we're meeting those particular goals and engaging individuals to literally encourage them to apply, that there's a real benefit to being certified and going after government contracts in the state
And
and
Ms.
local
Williams?
jurisdictions.
Thank you. Ms. Williams?
I am not as familiar with the MBE program as I am with the federal. What is it, the 8A, which sounds very similar to that, where you graduate from the program just because of my experience as, a government contractor. But, working for small minority businesses, we did, in a couple of companies, experience just that. Kind of being moved away and shoved aside. So that does exist.
Okay. Well, thank you.
Most
All
local
right.
programs and state programs were based off of the 8A programs. It was modeled off of it, which is surprising to me that the implementation or the encouragement, well, let me just say this. On procurement major contracts in the state, individuals vote on it because they believe that they have a chance at actually participating at some level, ownership or contracts. However, once laws pass, it is often said that it's unconstitutional to do a race-based program or to do a set-aside program when the 8A program, in fact, does just that. So we're still looking at how do we take the 8A program and model it somewhat or improve upon it to increase the participation levels.
Okay. All right. So when was the MBE program not that one. Sorry. When was it established on the state level? When was the MBE program established on the state level?
1978.
1978.
Okay. Now I have a question. When we talk about MBE, were women involved in that? On the Fed, were they included on the federal level as well as the state level, or were they not for the MBE program? Joe?
I'm sorry. No,
were women
white female,
part of it?
white female were not included in the program initially.
Okay.
But because it was a executive order by the president, it had to have the support of the Senate and the Congress. And at that time, there were more white females than there were Black elected officials.
Okay.
And so the compromise was to include white females. Now, granted, it was not an unreasonable compromise because the argument was presented. And the argument was that women's suffrage in the 1900s, women didn't have the right to vote. They were never in servitude, but they did not have the right to vote as individuals. And so it was a compromise between the African-American population, Hispanic population, and the white females in Congress to all agree that they would bring white females into the program.
Okay. So when were African-American women included in the MBE program?
African-Americans were included in the first declaration or the first executive order that was done by Richard Nixon. They were the impetus of the program. There would be no program if it was not the African Americans. And some of those African Americans who were instrumental in making this program or putting this program in place were individuals from Baltimore City, aggressively done by Parent Mitchell. And individuals who don't know Parent Mitchell might know Clarence Mitchell, CP3, and those individuals who were descendants of Perrin and Clarence and the first Clarence Mitchell in Baltimore. And that made the Mitchells a very powerful um, um, political family in Baltimore City. Aggressive, on the point. They stood up and they fought hard. Their uncle did, Perrin, fought hard on federal legislation. And he was known as the individual who was responsible, African American, who was responsible on the East Coast for implementing and pushing, making sure that a program was in place. And behind the scenes, he made sure that it stayed in place. Later on, individuals such as Ron Dellums, who you might know from California, and individuals from Chicago came on and became very supportive of the program, and they kept the program in place and they improved the program through the entire time of its inception. And it seems to be a situation that when those individuals who initially saw the benefit of pushing it in place passed on, other individuals along the way who were elected politicians saw a program, but they didn't see the need to put the aggressive energy behind it or to spend enough time that really researching themselves to know what the program and from where it came from. So I always say this: if you don't know your roots, if you don't know your foundation, you're out there and you're running things and you're doing them, but you don't know where it came from. And probably that accounts for maybe 60, 70, 80% of the people who sit in these positions on a state level. They sit in there, they get paid good money to run minority business programs, diversity programs, as we call them now, which have been since watered down. They don't know how to fight for those programs to stay in place, and they reduce them down to diversity programs. And the more you reduce them down, then what you do is have a program that can be challenged in court. One of the portions of the law was to make sure that the program remained focused, narrowly tailored. Okay, so, and that means a lot. It means that if a group of people were discriminated against, like Native Americans, Alaskans, African Americans in slavery were discriminated against, and then later on bringing on white females, you cannot keep adding groups to that particular group because it's no longer narrowly tailored. What it turns out to be is a program that white males then look at and decide that they've got to target that program because, in essence, it includes everybody but them. And so that brought on the attack on the ME program to say that, wait a minute, we're going to challenge this thing in court. And two court systems picked it up. And when they did their program study in court, Fourth Circuit Court, they determined that, yes, the programs did discriminate because too many people were involved in the program, and each state had to go back and narrowly tailor their program to make sure that they didn't include a lot of individuals in the program. What we have not done as a state of Maryland is to narrowly tailor our program. Instead of narrowly tailoring our program, because the program does say this, that is that if at any point in time that the program does not meet the requirements then of serving a particular group that was discriminated against, and those will be one of those four original groups, then you can implement a set-aside program that will target African American, Native American, to make sure that we improve that. And the set-aside is a really important word here. It's not just a word that you throw around. Set-aside means that you can do as the 8A program. The state can actually run a program that a percentage of those contracts can be put in a pool, and only African Americans and Native Americans will be able, or those other two groups will be able to compete versus a large pool of individuals competing. And
Okay.
they will then not have the heavy competition of people who have a lot more ability to fight those smaller groups. It makes it unfair for them to have the competitive small firms of competitive compete against billion-dollar corporations who've been in the industry for hundreds of years performing, and you've got to go in as a young corporation and prepare yourself to defeat to compete in their world. Is almost an impossibility. And unfortunately, in the state of Maryland and in the counties in the state of Maryland and around the country, we're fighting that dilemma.
All right. Welcome, Mr. O'Neill. How are you? So
All right, can you hear me?
you're actually, so we need to see your face, Mr. O'Neill. We got to see that smile. We got to see that go
You
get.
got a banner in front of me, baby.
But see, if you got it, you are a union man. So you're supposed to sit up straight, sit up tall, because you fight for our rights, right?
Yeah, that's why I'm
Okay.
laying down, because I'm fighting for them right and I'm tired. I can't. Can you hear me?
Of course, but I gotta see you. See you. It's like half your
No, I
head
didn't
cut
know. I
off.
didn't know if you could hear me because can't
I
see
can
my
hear. Of
buttons.
course, I can hear you. Oh my goodness, yes, indeed. So we're talking about what the MBE program is. We talked about when the MBE was established in the state of Maryland and in this on the federal level, and we're talking about the lack of effectiveness that the state of Maryland and the counties have towards Black MBE businesses. So
Okay.
our question, so we're giving you the floor, Mr. O'Neill.
The floor about what? What do you want me to say?
Okay, so I gave you the
No,
grounds.
I know. I've
Inequities
been working
so
with
the
Joe.
inequities that Black businesses have in the state of Maryland and in the counties.
Yeah.
Why isn't their participation validated? Or why is it limited?
I think in the areas where we have Black politicians, they haven't solidified or they let the counties in the state water down these programs what Perrin Mitchell and them established, and it's no
Okay.
follow through. You know what I mean? I was just looking today. Like Whiting Turner is like the second or third largest corporation in Maryland. You know what I mean? But when we got those he made it off the MGM, the cap of the highway, stuff like that. And what I find is appalling, the policing of these programs, or when those changes is going down, those Black politicians are not speaking up. I don't know. It was early in the year. I was on Facebook, and one of our council persons, they was talking about how bad it was. Well, I say, wait a minute, how are you going to talk about that when you're the one? When MGM was being built, it was just say it's their best effort. They didn't make them do anything. And the fine, if they didn't do it, it was basically I think it was $1,000, $2,000 of a $1 billion corporation. You know what I
It was a
mean?
slap on the wrist. It was 350 thousand or lower. It was a small amount that was
Yeah,
insulting to the
you're right.
size of the industry. And to look at the community benefits agreements that are put in place, it does not encourage participation, because the majority of the developers contribute to political campaigns. So we're fighting against individuals being able to finance campaigns and the promises that they make for capital for companies like developers capitalizing them. Whiting and Turner, along with the other major contractors. What's that other company?
Hensel Phelps,
Hensel.
Henson Phelps, Whitening Turner,
And it's the one that does the highway in
Camel.
general something. It's out of Montgomery County. They're doing all the highway work. And the deal is, but my thing is that we have in Prince George's County, we had people that look like us at the table, and weren't aggressively following this and making sure to enforce those MBE laws and stuff. You know what I mean? And that's the problem that I have. And I'm just hoping that when we get our new governor, those things will change. You know what I mean? And we have to make sure that they do it. We just don't. There's nobody's out there, and people don't like when I say this, like a Marion Barry, to make sure that those programs were enforced and made that they work and stuff. You know what I mean? And that's what we need to look at, because that's what's happening right now with the black farmers. The money that came, the black farmers that Biden gave, they're trying to do the same thing they did with these MBEs, water it down, best needs.
Okay.
So that could be anybody. You know what I
The
mean?
language of best effort is a
Yeah.
problem.
Right.
When we use language of best effort, you basically are saying that the argument that there's no qualified MBEs to fulfill these contracts. But I think the process itself is also a challenge, and that's not just at the governor's level, but it's at the local level. An example that I'm talking about, we just had in Prince George's, the county council that tried to empower developers, opposed to retaining the power with the people, the right to choose and the right to decide on who those contracts will be awarded to. Then you have procurement officers that are on a time frame to execute and get those projects up, running, and done. And that process within itself is an issue. Small businesses, especially micro businesses that are trying to gain access, won't have the manpower to expedite a completed bid in 10 days, in 9 days, in 15 days. The one of the barriers that was in the disparity study report was communication. How you're advertising it, how much notice or awareness do the public have that the project even exists or is being thought about. If it becomes a part of your radar, preparation can be different. But accountability and compliance was also a major barrier in the 2020 study and the 2019 study. Both of those studies pointed out that until we deal with mid-level management and hold them accountable, and we know that it have to come from the head down to enforce compliance and to make sure that they meet those percentages of participation, which is not being done, which keeps the wealth gap what it is.
Okay. So you answered like two of my questions all at one time. So the first one was, how is the state program performing? Is it performing to the highest level, or is it performing not so good?
The state level went to hell under the Hogan administration. And literally, I'm being nice. I really wanted to use some other choice words. But
Okay.
the reality of it is that there was no encouragement to include minority businesses. And I want to speak quite frankly about Black businesses, because literally, if your state procurement doesn't resemble its residents, its members of the state, we have a problem. If we're now 51% of the population, then we should have a larger percentage of contracts awarded to people that look like us. I mean, the Asian population, Hispanic population, and women, as a female business owner, I have a major problem with the state not ensuring that they're doing their due diligence to make sure that minority businesses are at the table in every major industry.
Okay. All right. Joe, how
Yes.
is the state program performing?
The numbers, and I'm gonna just use the numbers that the agencies that were identified, and I'll pick up a civic agency, the comptroller's office, for example, and this is the person who ran for governor, who ran on his record of doing business with MBE business people and did less than 53%.
16%.
Six, no, 53% of the goal.
Gotcha.
16, I'm using percentages. Your number is right, Lisa, but I'm using percentage of the goal. The goal is 29 percent. The state of Maryland is established as the goal 29%.
Yes.
So as you stated, he did that number, but that was less than 53% of the goal. Now, how do you, as an agency, function and think that you've done a good job with minority business people if you are doing those kind of low numbers? Now, other agencies in the county, in the state of Maryland, did exceed that, but overall, all of the agencies in the state of Maryland has done less than 50%. They are doing around 14% under the last 8 years. So that means that we've been left out of at least 50% of procurement opportunities that should have gone to African American and other minority business people in the state. And that number is horrific. It's asinine. No other group of people would say that you're doing a good job and you keep getting reelected with those numbers. Now, as it turned out, Hogan's numbers did not work well for him in this election. I won't say that that's what caused him an election, but we'll say this is that the African American population should have been well prepared to go for anybody else besides Francho during this election if he was going to push out a black agenda. And those numbers are going to show that there was no way that you can run for governor of the state of Maryland with a black agenda that did those numbers out of an office that you control. Now, and then I'll go to the other agencies. There was an agency that was headed up by the person who was running for governor against Cox, and her name fails me.
Kelly.
Kelly's agency did 4%. And this is not African American. This is all MBE. And she had no issue with the fact that she only did 4%. And this is Kelly. Now we go, okay, well, why are we so hard on Cox and not on Kelly? Both of them did very poor jobs. Cox will do no better. He doesn't even have a program that will go in and do anything. He's not even focusing on bringing any MBE groups to the table. But Kelly ran a program on a history of being in office for about 8 years that did less than 4%. Wow. But what bothers me so much about this, Quandra, is that as African American business people and as African American elected officials, we keep electing same officials to go into office. They don't push so that the African American community can do any better. And then you wonder why the black kids are sitting on the corners in Baltimore cities with squeegees. It's because they don't have any jobs. They don't have African Americans out there that have companies who can employ them. And everybody knows that we employ our own. Okay? But if you don't have those companies doing well, your population and your numbers are going to do poorly. Okay? So my thing is, and everybody should be on the same page on this one, is that nobody should be sitting in any office, whether it's Prince George County, whether it's Charles County, whether it's Montgomery County, especially if you're in an African-American leadership position, unless you're advocating for African Americans. Now, I just left a fundraiser for Wes, and he was, as Donnie said, unapologetically black.
Yes.
An audience that was majority white, and he was talking about what he's going to do for the black community who has been left behind. That's the kind of aggressive leadership. But I also want to say this, is that as your show does and as Donnie's show does, we have to be aggressive. We have to be on the point. We have to hold them accountable. We have to do report cards. We have to stay on top of them, because if we leave them alone, in Earl's language, they are user-friendly Negroes who will collect the paycheck but will do absolutely nothing. They will not rock the boat. And that's what we need in order to be aggressive and out there making things happen.
Did we get a smile from you, Mr. O'Neill?
Well,
did we get a smile?
I say
even
something. When people are finding to realize what I'm talking about, you know what I mean?
Okay. Now, how do you think that the state program is performing? How do you think that the state program is performing in the state of Maryland?
You asking me? You asking me?
Yes, of course I'm asking you.
I don't know if you remember the last call when we got in the discussion. Mm-hmm. It was the three of us with some other people with MGM, mm-hmm. and we were talking about the MBE programs. Mm-hmm. And I think I didn't go to the meeting. I think Joe and some other people went to the meeting along with one of our people. And the first thing the lieutenant governor said, don't get into that MGM stuff. So, okay. You know, they had no intention of doing anything. You know what I mean? And the thing, I have a local project right down. I mean, is the new K-8 school they're building, and the deal with that. And this is what they do that really pisses you off.
Okay.
When they come to your neighborhood and they say like Sparrows Point, because I was reading about the guy Jim Davis. That's his big project. You know who he is, don't you? Mm-hmm. Well, you know, Jim Davis was a guy with, you know, we got a staffing company. Well, he's doing that whole Sparrows Points thing. And I think he's supposed to employ 10,000 people there, you know, that whole complex, you know, Amazon, everybody supposed to be moving over there. But see what they do, what they give us is a black project manager to go to community meetings. You know what I mean? Or they, mm-hmm. you know, like this thing, and then they have somebody who's like representing the investment community. And so when you start, they get more offended than the owners of the company that we even talk about MBEs. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And all the thing is say, oh, well, let's have a task force and talk about it. You know mm-hmm. what I mean? And that's what they do. You know, like I told you, is it Metro General or whatever the thing that's doing the highway construction? They're doing all Indian Head Highway where I live at. That's the state highway. Mm-hmm. And unless it's a dump truck guy, I mean, and I'm just talking about workers now. Unless it's the dump truck guy, you ain't seeing no black folks over there. You know what I mean? And not only when I'm like Joe saying, they're not going to hire us anyway. You know, I mean, hire us when they do that. And what happens if they do a minority thing? Because I had people to tell me about this. If they do get a contract, they slow on their money. Mm. So the person gets so frustrated, he'll stop doing it. But what he can do, the projects keep going on because there's nobody to come there 4 months from there and say, is Joe and them still working there? Mm-hmm. And if they get caught, they just hire somebody real quick and do the same thing as them until they finish the program. I mean, they do that all over the country. You know what I mean?
Compliance.
Yeah,
compliance is a big issue.
Right. And then we like I say, and this thing down the street, it's a big project, and they're doing like I think it's 2 or 3 K-8. You know, it's a big school. You know what I mean? And then when you ask, we wasn't even talking about. We didn't even get to the minority participation part. We were just saying the site is a flood zone. You know what I mean? And so in the local government, they get upset because you asked about it and stuff. We said not stop the program, but you have to take precautions. You got a new drainage system going to an old system. You know, it's going to be some disruption if you're not changing the old system. Mm-hmm. You know, and what are you doing with the infrastructure money to alleviate that problem? You know what I mean? But I mean, we just don't have a Martin Luther King, or not even half of Martin Luther King from MBE program. I mean, politicians. You know what I mean? We hope if we get Senator Muse back in, you know, one thing we say about men, why you keep on saying? At least he asked the question. He asked questions about MGM. You know, what is this? You sure he's going to do this? But he had other people who was compromised and didn't support him or wasn't strong enough. I mean, it's just like the money to the black colleges, the minority colleges, you know, in Maryland. Yeah, they got the money, but think how long they've been working on that. That's been a long time. You know what I mean? That's been a long time. And we can't wait that long because we keep on saying we the richest, but ain't nobody getting a piece of that capital. You know what I mean? Ain't nobody, I mean, and that's with state programs too. You know what I mean? We got, and then we got some job, we got some projects we can give them though. But, you know.
Progress is slow, and we know progress is slow, but we're still, you know, my thing is big money controls or dictates where these contracts are going to. So transparency and technology needs to be, you know, it was one of the recommendations in the report, this disparity study, but a recommendation that I do agree with. I mean, technology would allow those small subcontractors to see when the primes are paid. Accountability and compliance, if they're paid, why are you holding the monies for your subcontractors and your subcontractors? You know, that's a technology issue. It would also create a transparency to see who's constantly getting these contracts. Can we put a policy in place that would secure a turnover, that the same Whiting and Turners, Hensel Phelps, that these same contractors are not being awarded, even with what they call the chosen black firms? You know, you need to encourage new companies to be able to perform or to at least gain experience, or they will constantly be in the loop of saying, well, we don't have qualified companies and we need to move the needle. Bowie State has proven that they have met every minority participation goal out there and exceeds the state because they hold their procurement office accountable for getting the job done.
Yeah, and I was out there this weekend at the game. There, they got some development over there. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Yeah, they got real development over there. But you know, I mean, that's the challenge that we have to with this new whole administration to take over in January.
It's at the local level too, because that county council in Prince George has just tried to hoodwink you, Earl.
You no. I'm saying that, but see,
I'm still like, are you serious?
No, I said you didn't let me finish, Lisa. If you let me finish, I'm talking about the state things because my thing is with Wes. You know, and me and Joe talk about this, and I say, he's going to have to, if he's going to make this program work, he's going to have to offend some of his supporters who's local elected officials. We're talking about down here in Prince George's County. You know, you're not doing it. I'm sending that money down here, and you know, we still got the same numbers and stuff. You know what I mean? And then also we need to talk about, and Lisa hit it. If you don't have people in the state, why can't you get a minority and then he can subcontract to subcontracted if he has a major subcontract? I'm saying, you know what I mean? You could do something like that, but you know,
you can unbundle the contracts. So if they're too big to bond or have additional barriers, you can unbundle the contracts to make them more accessible, especially to minority businesses.
And let me add this, because I think sometimes we underestimate what we really have in the community. We don't have a lack of companies with the inability to compete. We just have a state or a county that don't want those individuals to be participating at the table.
That's
So
true.
we don't have to look
Right.
or try to do anything special. Just there's an old song that was done by James Brown. Just open the door and I get it myself. You got you have a lot of companies, minority companies out there that have the capacity, but people are blocking them from getting to the table. So we don't have a bunch of disability. They would love to say that we can't find them. They're not there. I see them every day. I see companies that are millionaires, billionaires out there. Hell, you got this crazy guy out there, Kanye West, that's worth $2 billion in dollars. What the hell? I mean, why are we talking about people don't have access to money? We got all these individuals who have the capacity and money. That's not an issue. We've got bonding companies, we got finance companies, but those finance companies are not going to put their money into a situation that's going to risk them losing their money in an environment that's not anti that's anti-black,
Mhm.
that's going to be combative when you bring them to the table, that you've got to set up with employees who are running operation, who don't have control of an operation, that don't have leadership that's going to stand behind them. Who the heck's going to invest their money into companies, black companies? No black person is going to do that. No white person is going to put that into place. So in order for a program to work, it has to have a conducive uh, ideology that we want to make this work and we want to make this for all. And that's the what I hear when I hear Westmore, leave no one left behind in all this conversation. Now, that's what it's got to start from the chief. Now, and when he states it, it's got to run down to agency heads, because
Okay.
if he keeps the same people in place, they're going to be running with their same old program that they were running before. It's okay to give a grant a waiver. It's okay for the Board of Public Works to say that you guys go ahead because you came back to the table. You didn't have any companies that you could find out here. They could do this, and you didn't do a search. It's
Mhm.
okay for you to give this company, because he's a friend. He's a lobbyist, and he paid a lot of money in the campaign to my person to get there. So, okay, give him a waiver on this. This is what we're up against. We're not up against a ton of problems that we can't deal with. We're dealing with a very few small problems that can work if
Mhm.
you have if the desire and the intent is there. Then the program can work. It shows you well, because in most of these counties, including Prince George County, you have programs that are operating without the intent of them working for African American business people. Okay, so that's where we have to be. And I just say this for Earl is, yeah, you have to have African American, you have to have people like Martin Luther King out there, and it is not necessarily your senators who are going to be your your Martin Luther Kings. It's going to be people like you. It's going to be people like Lisa. It's going to be people like Quandra. It's going to be people like Donnie, who are not the people who are marching to free or to implement affirmative action programs. It's going to be people who are going to be there educating the people on an every week basis to make that difference. That's where we are in this particular movement now. We're not a one-man movement where you shoot the leader and it's gone. We're at a movement where everybody has a role to play. And that's what we're gonna have to wake up. We got to wake up in Prince George County. We got to wake it up in Baltimore City. We got to wake it up in Baltimore County and throughout the state of Maryland and throughout the country. That's what we're gonna have to do. And I think we see that at a high level. You see such a fight taking place on the electoral level. You see it in Florida. You see it in Georgia. You see it in Ohio. And evil is trying its best to
Mhm.
outweigh good. But we have to be there and we have to fight all the way throughout. And there is no relaxing. We have to win. That's the bottom line.
Okay, so Lisa, you did say some things about the disparity study. Does anyone else want to talk about the disparity study?
It's a question. What is I see is asking what is a disparity study?
Yeah, what is the disparity study?
The disparity study is a study. Well, there's many different types of disparity study, but the one I'm referring to is a utilization of. It analyzes the utilization of minority participation on procurement in a particular jurisdiction.
Okay.
In this case, I'm referring to Prince George's County's disparity study, particularly because that study analyzed procurement in Fairfax, Virginia, Arlington, DC, the surrounding areas, the marketplace as a whole, and looked at over $2 billion were spent in procurement between 2008 and 2020. And of that $2 billion, over 66% went to non-minority firms. And the breakdown of that, 13% to African Americans, and respectively 12 or 11% to Hispanic, and it goes down and down. Whereas women businesses were only 1%, represented only 1% of procurement in this particular region. So the disparity studies are necessary to see if a continuation of set-aside programs or diversity programs are actually needed in any particular jurisdiction. Prince George's County, the state, and Baltimore, and anywhere else where discriminatory practices has been proven, you need a disparity study to analyze, verify, and support that argument.
Okay.
And Quandra, on what Lisa is saying is that from that study, the numbers show that as prime contractors competing overall in the prime contractor industry, that between 64 to 66% of those contracts in Prince George County were of the overall dollar value of those firms, of those contracts, went to non-minority firms. That's prime, and that's
subcontracting.
And then subcontract, the 66% of the 64%, 66% in prime contract, 64 went in subcontract. So you got to understand the difference. Prime means that I'm gonna bid the contract directly, and I don't have anybody to go through. I can go to the county, I bid it, and I get it. So when we were competitive on that level, white companies still got 64% of the contracts.
Right.
And the rest of the numbers were split between four groups: Hispanics, white female, Asian firms, Native Americans, and African Americans. And I think our best numbers in that particular case was about 14%. That we would get. 13% was the number that we were getting as an African American group of people when you compile the amount of money that we got. The white female in the industry surprisingly did lower, and that states basically the reason why they did lower was because the white females do not do subcontracting. And they do prime contracting where their numbers are higher. They know that they're not going to sit back in a roll and wait till the prime contractor gets paid and then wait 30 to 60 days to get their money. They don't want to compete in that industry. So we got African American and the smaller groups who says, I can't compete. I don't have the bonding capacity, so I got to compete. But the reality of it is that the prime contractor, when they put you in that role, they get their money first.
Yes, they do.
They get their money first, and they relegate you to 30 days of carrying a damn project for themselves and to pay you when you put pressure on them to pay you. It's ridiculous. Now, whenever you have a county such as Prince George County, where your population level, and I think Earl, you might know this, was maybe about 68, 69, 70% African American, and your prime contractor numbers are 14%, and your subcontractors are 14, and your prime contractor for African American firms are around the same number. That's utterly ridiculous. Nobody does
Yes,
that.
it
That's
is.
South Africa's numbers back during apartheid. Okay, that means that the same individuals who are running your minority programs and keeping you enslaved are still doing the same thing. They just don't have you in chains. They have you at beck and call, controlling the money, and you have to go and beg for your money from them. You got to fight them in court to get your money. And until we make those changes in the state and in the county, then we're going to be subjected to that. And not only we going to be subjected to that, our kids and grandkids are going to be subjected to the same thing. And now is the time for us to hold our elected leadership accountable, from the governor to the mayor to the county executives to the commissioners
The
to the
councils.
delegates, all the way down to everybody who's elected a job should not be there collecting a paycheck and not delivering. So that's what we have. That's our role in the community, to put ourselves in the group, Wanda, and to run report cards on how these individuals are doing. If they are not doing what they're supposed to do, they got to be, the community's got to know about it. You got to use your media to let everybody know. You have to do your report. Again, the report cards, I want to emphasize that the report cards are the key. And when people know that they're not performing and we come out against it, we remove them from office until we get what we need to take place, because we have a system that's a Trump system. And the Trump system is a system that the people who unapologetically say that I'm the favorite son, I get the right to do this because my family is privileged, we have control, and they send that doctrine all the way through. And if you don't stand up, those people will take over your country and you won't be running a democracy anymore. So we have something big coming up in November, and that's the election. And we got to start by putting people in place who don't have an issue, who have courage, and we got to be behind them. And then we have to force them to stand up, even with courage, because behind closed doors, they can be pressured. And that's what's happening in Prince George County, is that you got a government, elected government there, but the problem with them is you got major developers who are putting pressure on those individuals to go their way. They would love to send money over to minority and African American firms, but if your white developer is saying don't do this,
then it doesn't happen.
or otherwise I'm gonna pull my money away from you, what are they gonna do?
They're gonna do what they tell you.
That's it, and that's all I'm saying. So we got a big job ahead of us, but I think we're all up for the fight.
So what are the proposed solutions to increasing participation by Black firms and businesses?
I will say this, and I'll just shut up after this, is that the way we have to do it is that it's not a short term. We have to develop a strategy, and we have to implement the strategy, and that we got to do it. And media is a key role behind it. Because if you're talking in a room and you're not doing anything, nobody hears you. It's the old saying, if a tree falls in the middle of the forest, did the tree really fall? We don't know because you didn't hear. Okay. So we have to take ourselves out of that situation, and we have to go back to being a voice of the people. We got to do it through the way you're doing it now, through media and through people who are not afraid to stand up aggressively against these actions. And there are people out there would love to see that show up. The event that I'm at now is an event that people are saying, well, look, we've been waiting for you forever. And these are not Black folk who are saying, these are white folk who are saying, well, you're going to be the next president because I like what you're saying. And what you're saying is leave no one behind. Support African Americans who've been left out. So, but unless you stand up and able to say that for yourself, who's gonna help you? And you, Quandra, you can know this one real well. You know that when you're sleeping on the streets and you walk, and the person walks up to you in your car, and they hold up their hands out and ask you for money, and you look at them, and the first thing comes to your mind is wind my window up and let me keep moving. You don't think about helping this person. You think about, okay, is this person trying to rip you off? Why is he on this corner? I'm not helping him. That's what you think. We have to take ourselves out of being in that position and empower ourselves. And then we have to help those individuals who've lost their ability to defend for themselves and who are in that position. And we have to provide them an opportunity to raise themselves. Okay, we cannot get so indifferent that we forget about the lineage that we're here to represent and to make the world a better world. Once we do that, and we know how to do it, we can move forward. But the plan is a plan that we'll create, and I would say that we'll create over the programs that we put in place, and we'll come back the next show with a plan on how we're going to do this. We'll come back on the next show. We'll talk about in depth Prince George County's program, Baltimore City's program, what they're not doing, who's not doing the job, and we'll just stay on them until we force them to do their job, and we'll make a difference.
And Miss Alice?
You know, I it's a combination. For me, it's transparency and involving what Joe was saying, holding individual accountable. Transparency would be to keep. We're in a age where technology is everywhere, media is everywhere. If right there in your hand, you can hold individuals accountable and go live. We have to increase visibility on what's actually happening behind closed doors, because as Earl was saying, the user-friendly Negroes or people, well, they're not paying attention until it actually affects their bottom line or their home, like the housing crisis. So transparency, technology with posting, when prime contractors are paid, who are the prime contractors, who's getting these awards over and over again, advertising, the notice, the period of notice. If in the plan, in the 5-year plan, they're projecting to build out a particular area, that plan should be well communicated to the public of the intent. Parks and planning goes into your community and holds focus groups, but those focus groups always end up the opposite of what exactly you talked about in the meeting. But they've met the requirement by law by holding the meeting. Individuals need to understand that connection and that relation of how it trickles down to procurement and getting contract awards into our communities. What does that mean? So we have to look at advertising. We have to come up with a plan, a notice period, use technology to help contractors see when primes are being paid, when an opportunity exists, and in a timely manner. Then we also have to look at job readiness and contract readiness. Are we helping those small businesses that may have back office needs that cannot put together a proposal? We ran a business incubator that helped minority businesses become contract ready to compete. One of the contracts I worked on with the lieutenant governor was taking 20 minority businesses and getting them prepared to win contracts at the federal, local, and county levels. We were supposed to have taken businesses that were underutilized, micro businesses, but unfortunately, the lieutenant governor preferred to do the cream of the crop. So the success of that business, of that project, was not actually widely known because of it. But if we get back to the basis of doing just that, making sure that our certified businesses are not just going through the process and time to get certified, only to just become a member on the state's roster. But once they're certified, they can then move into the next step of actually bidding and winning awards, even if it's low hanging fruit. A start is a start, and it helps them to build a resume.
Okay. Mr. O'Neill.
Well, I agree with what everybody else says. Basically, we have to, basically be able to. He said, like, we have to be the people. The incident earlier, I guess, was last month when they was trying to give the developers control over the council. Once it got out, they tabled the legislation indefinitely. I think that goes to Joe's point. If we, what to say, who will tell the people, as long as we tell the people, they we can scare them off, but it's one thing scaring them off, but the other thing is making them do action in the opposite way. That's what they did earlier in the year when they tried to say, what is it called, homestead law. Basically, they was trying to pass this legislation. They assess your property higher so they can raise your property tax. You know what I mean? People got wind of that. It was 2 or 3 council people had a town hall meeting. They found it was 400, 600 people on it. They stopped that. So I think Joe's point is well taken, is that we have to tell people, because I'm also not only a labor person, I'm with the South County Economic Development Board. And we have our general meetings. We always, and I'm not saying this, we'll always get one person will come to this meeting and say, I got all the papers in place, all the civic. I do some business in Virginia, DC, Washington State, but I can't do stuff here. Or, or even the state of Maryland and stuff. You know what I mean? And I mean, they go all week around the country. They got a business, but they live here and they want to do business here because everybody don't want to get on a plane or nothing like that. But, we just have to work on it. Like Joe say, we put some things in front of the people, because you can't cry wolf and they say, well, what should we do? We got to be able to send them, give them, this is what you need to do, for solutions.
Okay, so like Joe said, we had talked about this, and we're going to give a report card. So I'm going to list out a group of people who in Prince George's County that are a disappointment. They're going to be delegates and county councilmen. The first one is Delegate Daryl Barnes.
What you want us to do now? What you want us to do?
I'm giving out a report card.
Okay.
Delegate Karen Coles, Delegate Andrea Harrison, County Councilman Mel Franklin, County Councilman Sidney Harrison. You are considered a disappointment in Prince George's County. You can come on political Cipher and plead your case. Otherwise, there are some others, so we're going to be naming them. You can feel free to give me a call at 443-355-1892, or you can email me at quandra.gaines@gmail.com, and you can actually come on the show and maybe tell me why you're not a disappointment, why you are an asset in Prince George's County. So we're going to do each county: Charles County, Baltimore City, Baltimore County, Montgomery County, you name it, we're going to do it. And on that note, one of the things I learned a lot about MBE. My goal is to possibly be a WBE. I did not realize there were so many obstacles out here, but it is. And education is important. Is important, just like education about the general election. We have November the 8th. The last day of registration was the other day, was this week. So now you have the ballot that you have to turn in by November the 1st. So we're going to be talking about different things about the polls, but it's very important that you view shows like mine and others on Black USA News under the direction of Donnie Glover. And I want to thank you for that. But on that note, it is imperative that if you are a Black firm, Black MBE, and you don't feel that your views or your participation is noted, please feel free to give us a shout out and we'll put you on Political Cipher. On that note, thank you, Mr. O'Neill. We did miss you. Lisa, as always. Joey.
Thank you.
Thank you. It's always been a pleasure. Everyone have a good evening.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Bye.
Take it easy. Thank you very much.
Okay.
You're
Bye-bye.
welcome.